Hey again, and today's video is going to be about one of the greatest manga to have ever existed without actually being a manga. Solo Leveling is a manhwa, which is basically the same thing as a manga, except that manhwa are usually created by Korean authors, whereas mangas are from Japanese authors. And when talking about manhwas, Solo Leveling is considered as the most popular manhwa to have ever been created. It started publishing in 2016 as a light novel, but it really began to grow when the manhwa version was released in 2018, and it didn't take long before it became the most popular manhwa out there. The story follows main character Sung Jin-woo. He is classified as an E rank hunter. There are basically ranks from S to E, and hunters are equivalent to adventurers in an MMORPG. Hunters are in different guilds and travel through other worlds through gates which spawn randomly. Hunters enter these gates to defeat monsters and find all sorts of treasure and riches. It's very similar to a game when explaining its premise. However, where it differentiates itself from a game, but now falls more in line with a power fantasy come-up story, is how Sung Jin-woo acquires and grows, both in power and notoriety throughout the manhwa. I expect everyone who watches this video to have already read Solo Leveling or is reading it, so there will be slight spoilers. But if you haven't read it, that's fine too, as I won't be going into story specifics or deep diving into plot points. The first point of difference that Solo Leveling establishes, and is probably the most important factor, is its incredible art style. There is something about Solo Leveling's art style that just elevates it above so many other manhwas and even manga in artwork quality. For someone like me who was just barely getting introduced into the world of manhwa, and Solo Leveling being one of the first manhwa I had ever read, I was constantly questioning how this artwork was created and if it was even possible for a single illustrator to be able to consistently keep up this level of artwork. There are so many other manhwa and manga out there that are very similar to the premise of Solo Leveling, with the main protagonist going from zero to hero and becoming this overpowered and unbeatable badass. And if you're someone who has read a lot of these types of stories, it's hard to always be able to immerse yourself fully in them. And when you keep seeing the same character archetypes and same sequences happening again and again. Stories like these need some kind of edge or X factor to set them apart from its counterparts. And in Solo Leveling's case, the design of its monsters, from goblins to orcs, giants, death knights, and all other sorts of bosses and monsters you could find in an MMORPG game, are so immaculately drawn. I have never read any manga or manhwa that have been able to consistently display its monsters and creatures in such a frightening manner, other than Berserk. The creatures in Berserk, I felt, always left me with a feeling of dread and a feeling of, oh shit, this is nightmare fuel. And while Solo Leveling doesn't really give that same feel, it definitely does show off its creatures' designs in a rather menacing way, and each panel showing these monsters was always able to make me feel just how strong these monsters were. If it be the war cries of the monsters ready to battle, or how insanely powerful they looked when decimating humans and the surrounding environment. It was always the designs of these monsters that were the foundation of their ability to intimidate and simultaneously engage myself more in the fights that Sung Jin-woo would have had with them. Most of the time, Sung Jin-woo would usually not have any trouble fighting these monsters, and it was more so at the start of the series where he was still learning about his powers and still leveling up, where he would struggle a lot. I for one love to see when characters are fighting for their life and encounter real hardship, as I feel that's one of the most important prerequisites into creating a strong character in a story. But I think Solo Leveling is the only thing I have read where I've actually enjoyed watching the main character beat the shit out of people more than him getting the shit beat out of. Strange, right? Well, it comes down once again to the artwork of the fight scenes. Every fight scene, especially in midway and later on in the series, where the level of enemies and the stakes are steadily increasing, just becomes a feast for the eyes. The artwork in these scenes was so good, it felt like I was watching anime sometimes. Every attack, every punch, every form of action felt so real, and you could honestly feel the weight of each attack from all these different characters that Sung Jin-woo had encountered. I have praised the artwork a lot for this series, and for good reason. Other than Berserk, I have yet to see any other artwork showcasing attacks and its monsters in such a way that you can feel how strong these people really are. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is just how unique Sung Jin-woo's powers are. All his powers are shadow related, and without going into too much detail and entering spoiler territory about the origin of his powers, these powers are gained as he keeps leveling up throughout the world and traveling to different worlds. Whenever he uses his powers in a fight and you see his eyes turn purple, that's when you know shit's about to go down. A particular ability he possesses, which has to be the coolest shit I've ever seen, has forever changed the meaning of the word arise. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. I won't go into more details towards that as it is a big spoiler, but it's pretty badass. Although I did say that the later parts of the manhwa show off the best artwork due to the elevated nature of the fights and the MC gaining more insane powers, one part of the manhwa that will always leave a lasting impression, even if 50 years down the line and I've forgotten everything about solo leveling, I will never forget Sung Jin-woo and another party of people entering into what they thought was a D-rank dungeon. Back when Sung Jin-woo was still an E-rank hunter and considered the weakest hunter to ever live, he had joined a party going into this dungeon and was treated like garbage. He was made to hold the higher ranks weapons and basically act as their slave. As they continued with their raid on the dungeon, the party found another hidden dungeon, and while everything was quite easy for them in this D-rank dungeon, their confidence and greed got the best of them. They entered this dungeon only to find themselves trapped in a room full of terrifying gigantic statues. I remember reading up to this point and not really being very interested in the series. I felt the opening chapters were pretty bland and didn't really hook me in. It wasn't until the subsequent chapters where the MC's party was stuck in this dungeon that I really began to find myself getting into this. You've most likely seen this meme of a blue statue sinisterly grinning. You might have got a little chuckle out of that, but when I saw this statue's face in the manhwa, it was one of the early times that I had felt a true, genuine fear that couldn't be explained. Watching all Jin-woo's party members' face morph from excitement and anticipation from their raid to pure horror and dread in the span of a few chapters is something that will last in my memory for a long time. If I was to say one thing about solo leveling that really made me fall in love with it, it would give me the nostalgia of remembering back when I was a kid without internet or any devices or even a book to entertain myself with. I would pretend I was this omnipotent superhero with all these superpowers, and I would be entertained for hours on end. Watching Sung Jin-woo getting all these powers and defeating all these enemies reminded me of my childhood days of doing exactly what Jin-woo does in the manhwa. I hope you enjoyed the video, and although it wasn't a conventional theory, I just felt like I had to do a video on this as it's been on my mind for a while. Thanks for watching.